One, two, three. Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Another exciting guest, another exciting show, another exciting, informative show today. Let me explain to you what the show is about today. How can I say this? Because, I mean, this pre-interview with this young lady went on for hours. But she's going to share with us her journey and how important the mental health industry is, and almost how it saved her life and how she's saving other people's lives, how she's created a podcast, how she's getting ready to do her own television series. I mean, oh my God, the list goes on. This is Wonder Woman on steroids. Let's just put it like it is. Wonder Woman on steroids. I'd like to welcome to the show all the way from New York, Alison Lager. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
You know what? When we was doing the pre-interview, I was like, look, we need to go in and start taping because, I mean, me and you was going on and on and on with such great information. That's crazy. Let's start the show off with telling a little bit about who Alison actually is.
Well, I would say if I was going to describe myself, I'm somebody who just has learned through climbing out of one difficult experience after another, but not to sound like a victim, because that's the last thing that I want to sound like. I just came up in a really, should I begin? I was born in, I mean, do you want me to begin back? Then?
You was born the daughter of a sharecropper.
I was a very small baby. So basically, as a small baby, so I was born into a house of basically hippies and just a very loose and free environment that was very intellectual. And but their concept of giving to a child was to give them a lot of freedom during that period of time. So basically what they did was they neglected me. Ta-da! So I really didn't have a lot of guidance in terms of, or maybe protection, bumpers. I didn't have any bumpers. But what I love about it now in retrospect is that not having that, a lot of different crises and little traumas and bigger traumas, and they grew with me. But as that happened through my life, every single experience was something that made me into more of an insightful person, more of a person who was, and even as a little person, even though it felt bad and I felt badly, something was being created in me at a really deep level.
When you didn't mean to cut you off, Alison, but when you say free love, when you say I don't want to call it the hippie generation, I call it more like the sunflower, sunchild, the free spirited movement. You had a lot of drug use back then. I call it the experimental generation. They wasn't afraid to protest. They wasn't afraid to experience. Love was definitely on the menu. What was your parent? Take us into more of your parents, because a lot of viewers may not understand that particular generation. I know firsthand that we're dealing with war. We're dealing with Vietnam. We're dealing with the tragedies that war plays on people. But the media is giving one narrative, and we're getting another narrative from the actual people that were in there coming back from Vietnam, that were being labeled all kind of horrible things we won't talk about now, baby killers and so forth. And here's your parents that grew up in this generation that's caught up in this Vietnam political arena, and they also have children at the same time. What go a little bit deeper into what that was really like for you?
That is such an excellent question. I've never
Well,
had
thank
anybody
you.
ask me. It really, really is, because it's really making me think, because I always omit that part, but it just really ignited something in me. Yeah. I mean, I grew up with my mother, like vehemently, like hating, like, the police, and like hating, and like, just so upset over so many things, and showing me like on TV, like different, like very violent experiences that were happening to people, and
Right.
things that were happening to, and I remember, and my father always debating political things. So this is very interesting. You know what happened to me is that my dad was so into debating, my mother was into debating, and I didn't know that I was so smart. So
Right.
I have a really, actually, I mean, I'm not trying to brag, but I have a high IQ, and I didn't even know it, because I felt like anything intellectual was bad, and you would be torn down. Like if I brought up an idea or something, my dad would debate it, and give all these different political concepts, and it was really intense. And I remember they would talk about like the war. And I remember the music in my house, like they call me Mellow Yellow.
Right,
like all this stuff. Yeah. And like them showing me all this stuff from Woodstock, and just, I would go and see, like they would show me like people just naked. And I was really exposed, because it would be like, I could just be outside naked, running around in my yard, covered in mud, just kind of like Woodstock, basically. Right. And there was no like protection for me, like as a little girl, or, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
you are.
You're reminding me of all. I remember there was so much of that in my house. The adults would come in, and they would debate over things. And I always felt like that uncomfortable, conflictual, like, even though it was supposed to be a peaceful time, it was like people were angry.
It
even
was
though they
really
were fighting for love.
Yeah, we was
weird.
Individuals at that time, to my research, was they were fighting for love and to be heard. Questions wasn't being answered truthfully at that time. But with that said, did it put you in harm's way? Because you mentioned
it did.
Let me rephrase that, because you're a therapist. So let me rephrase that a little bit. Their attention to what they know as being a parent, because that's how they knew to be a parent. That was their way of showing love. Mm-hmm. We look back later, you said it was neglect, but with that, what were some of the other things that what they knew as being recognized as parents put you in harm's way, to now you look back and say, wow, these are things that you eventually had to work on in your adult lifehood?
Yeah, there's a few things. So they would, being such, like quote unquote kind of free spirits. So there wasn't really any guidelines. So it would be like the greatest gift they felt they could give me was freedom. So like then there would, I had older brothers, and so I was the youngest. And so my mother would be traveling all over the place and just leave. We were home alone all the time. It was like, yeah, all the time. So then like my brothers, they would have their friends over who were drinking and just doing drugs. They were just like, but it was normal to me. But there were always like boys in the house after me, And then there was no sense of like where I ended and someone else began. Like there was just no, and I think any child in that kind of a circumstance, when there's no one watching you, crisis just kind of, you don't know how to handle things. So the crisis just happens. So, I mean, there were just so many, I would wake up in the middle of the night and there would be a teenage boy, this has really happened, at the foot of my bed, like playing with my feet. And I'd be like, get out of Just,
Right.
and there was like no locks on the doors. Like people came in and out of my house. And it was just, I had a lot of shame because it just wasn't like I was growing up in like a kind of upper middle class neighborhood with all very manicured lawns and everything was like perfect. My house was like wild, but we grew up on the water. So it was like a nice neighborhood. My dad had a great business. He owned a movie studio, and he also had built sceneries for plays, movies, commercials. So it was weird. But there would be like grass. Like he was like, "Oh, you know, we're not going to comply with the, we're not going to be like everyone else with the manicured lawns." Like they were just fighting life to be free, but it made me not free. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So structure brings freedom.
So a lot of people might say that sounds kind of bizarre that, you know, here's some parents that will allow different individuals of the male sex to just come in with their daughter and I don't know, not be a parent. Yeah.
Well, they weren't there. They weren't there. My parents divorced and then my mother traveled. She went to like everywhere. She went on marine biology trips. She was like everywhere in Morocco.
So who actually was raising, who was supervising you guys?
No one. So,
really?
Yeah, I was the youngest, but I was the most mature. So I was like always cleaning and basically, but then, you know, in my middle school and like teenage years, I would, you know, experiment like with drugs, alcohol, or any of that. And then there was just a lot of that. But my mother would say things like this. She'd say, you know, you are so smart. Like I trust your judgment. And I actually like believed her and thought that I should trust my judgment too.
Right.
My judgment was awful. So, and I would have like I ended up, one of the things that happened was I ended up in a really bad, this was a little later on in life, but this was reflected in my, like the parenting. So like I had a really awful boyfriend. Okay. Like you couldn't even have had a worse boyfriend than I had. And like my parents they just accepted him.
Wait,
like no one said, this is
tell the viewers, what do you mean by really awful? Then I can kind of understand why your parents should not have seen what you consider awful now. What was he like?
Oh, okay. So basically he was a drug dealer. There was automatic weapons in the house. There was, I lived there. He was a big time drug dealer. He would get into fights all the time. I was in all these different kinds of situations with him where he would like kind of, because, you know, he was obviously he wasn't functioning very well or in a safe manner. So I was in a lot of dangerous situations that, it's my fault that I was going, but like, right. We were together and he's like, oh, I want to stop on this boardwalk over here. And, I'm like, we shouldn't get out of the car. And he's right. like, oh no, I just want, it's beautiful. I grew up over here. Well, let's just go out on the boardwalk. It was like 12 o'clock at night. I'm like, I don't want to get out of the car. And he's like, all right, we'll wait in the car. And I'm like, I don't want to wait in the car either. So I'm like, shit, what do? I go out on the boardwalk and we get mugged at gunpoint. So and then like the thing he did was like the guy put a gun in my stomach and a gun at his head. So he fights the guy. The guy steals my pocketbook, but I mean, I can't even see your face because I don't have my glasses on. You're probably like, oh, shit, I shouldn't have had her on the gas. What the hell is she on here? All right. So, and basically he fought this guy. Now he's a hero. But really, if you look at it as a wise human, he put me in a lot of danger.
Yeah. And your parents didn't think nothing about his actions? No, or let me rephrase it. Your mom gave you free will. Yeah. To make your decisions and your choices. She gave you the free will to do it.
Yeah. And it was kind of, it's so blurry when I look back. It's kind of like it was just kind of like not being, when you're not being parented, you may not notice you're not being parented if you're not like measuring it to other parents, because when you're in that kind of a state, you usually very have like a core sense of shame. Because so having that core sense of shame, I tended to befriend people who were in similar situations, so it all looked normal. We'll do that to maintain some sense of dignity. When
did you start realizing that this clearly wasn't normal? I mean, mom and dad's not there. They're doing their thing. I guess you can feel pretty swollen in a way, pumped up because they're now making you an adult, but you're really not ready to be an adult. You're realizing that different things. When does change start to happen for you? You got to realize this isn't going down. When do you start changing the landscape? I
think so when I was with that man, there was a few things that happened in the process, but there's like people talk about a bottom, but you can have really serious crises, which I did, with that gentleman. And I am answering your question, but it's kind of like it was incremental. So while that is happening, I started reading a book about, it was called Women Who Love Too Much. And then I was also in college at the same time. So I'm getting a 4.0 while I'm living with a drug addict. Okay. So there's a lot of dangerous situations, but I'm, going to bed early while they're up partying all night, and I'm getting a 4.0 in college. Like the whole thing's ridiculous, because what was being built in me was this sense of responsibility. I knew I had to take care of myself, but I was drawn to, I guess, a lack of predictability and lack of safety. So I was building into something as I was still doing things that were hurting me and also teaching me at the same time. So I was getting awakened over time. But there was one major, I guess I could say this was a major, there was quite a few major, but this was a major one, was I lived with him, and I remember calling my dad, and I said, I couldn't get the words out. And my dad knew. He was more balanced than my mom. But anyhow, he said, and they didn't live together. And he said, Alison, all you have to say to me is yes. And I will have you moved out of there in 2 hours.
Right.
So I couldn't even talk. And I said yes. And literally, he sent men, my brother, and they just packed me up and moved me out. And the next day, but what had happened right before that was there was a girl who was in the house, this is very sad, girl who was in the house. They were partying. My ex-boyfriend, his very good friend, and this girl. So I was down there, but wasn't partying. I went up to bed like 10 o'clock because I had school. And the next couple of days, I'm hearing that girl is missing. She was like missing, and everybody in the area is like, this girl's missing. I knew she was at my house.
Did you know her?
I mean, we weren't friends because she was like more like partier. She was just not really, she was a little younger than me. No, I mean, I knew her, but yeah. So what happened was I was like, oh my God, like this girl's missing. When was the last time she was seen? So I ended up calling I asked the guy who was with her, apparently drove her home. So I called him up and I said, do you know where, so-and-so is? She's missing. I said, and he was like, oh, I dropped her off. I said, you know what, we should go. I said, let's go drive somewhere and see if we could see where you dropped her off so we could tell the police. I could have gotten myself killed. So naive, right? Right. It ends up that she was dead. He killed her.
Whoa.
So,
whoa.
Yeah, he killed her.
So you go upstairs, go to bed.
Yeah.
This guy that you're dating killed her.
No, not the guy I'm dating. Not him. His friend.
His friend.
Yeah.
but you guys are in this guy's house.
No, I'm in my house that I live in with my boyfriend.
I got you.
That guy
I got
and
you.
the girl are over. Yeah.
How did he kill her? Was it with
He
drugs?
beat her to death.
What?
Yep.
Was he under the influence?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
So basically what happened was, so now if you see from my position, I don't know he killed her.
Right.
I don't even think he killed her. I have no, like, it's not in my brain. So then I'm saying, like, so then as time's going on, so then let's speed up to the day. Now this is a little, maybe a couple of weeks later, I say to my dad, yes, they come and move me out. This is not even, this is such a crazy story, because this is where you know that God is alive. I'm sorry. There is a divine thing happening. Okay. So now I move out. Literally, this is the crazy truth. The next day, that man that I was living with gets arrested. So they raid the house. He gets arrested. If I was there, I would have gotten arrested. I was not doing anything wrong. But if you're living in that house, you're getting arrested.
You're an accessory to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm gone. He gets arrested. So then I find out while he's arrested, and he's gone, I'm doing my thing. I find out that he got off he was only going to be sentenced for 3 years because he actually helped that guy get rid of the body. Okay. I can't believe I'm telling you this whole thing. I haven't even thought of this in so long, but
it's amazing. It's amazing what happens on this show.
I know. This is not even this is not even a quarter of my life. This is just like something I don't even ever think about. So anyhow, it's interesting. I'm telling the story. So what ended up happening was, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know. I found out actually from an article that he helped get rid of the body. I didn't even know he did. So it ends up, I end up having to be on the grand jury and in the a witness in the murder trial. So I had to testify that where, I had to put the murderer and her together. So that was like, I was a key witness in that murder trial. So.
Wow. Now I know I'm getting ready to come with the next question.
Yes.
When do you freaking wake up and say enough is enough?
I had already because I moved out and I was like already right. But then, once you make the decision to change your life, the ramifications, it's like, a boulder in the water, the ripples still keep coming, right? So I still had to do that. And also there was like, I needed to get like an attorney because I wasn't sure if they were going to ask me at the grand jury about the guy that I lived with. And I was like, oh my God, like, am I going to get in trouble because of what he did? So it was a whole thing. But I did my process in my life, even though this sounds really, there's a lot more to it. Like I've had a lot of other, you could call them tragedies. And I believe, just to be very current and show like head, heart, feet right here. Yeah. What I believe about every single thing in my life is that every thought, feeling, action, behavior is mine. It belongs to me. It's my responsibility. I never think, that happened to me. I think everything happened for me. I think my life was allowed to be like that so I could create the things that I've been able to create. And one of the things that it's done for me, which I love and hate, but I love more than I hate, is that I've experienced so many different kinds of fears and pains and confusions that it has helped me to, first of all, be non-judgmental. And then also, there is really not anything that someone can share with me that I would ever judge, and I mostly understand. Mm-hmm. And I believe in the value, like to understand is to love. And I think I would actually pray and be like, God, I used to say, use me like coins in your pocket and spend me the way you want. And now I don't say that anymore. But it was like naive. I mean, whatever. But
were you ever afraid? I mean, you're still young at this particular point in your life. Before we go to the next topic, were you afraid with knowing what you knew about what happened, or at least what they
I was
told
afraid of
you
everything.
For your life?
I was afraid of everything. I was afraid for my life, my whole life. I just, seriously, I had a fear of tragedy probably up until about 14 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was always afraid that some very, very major, terrible thing was going to happen. And terrible things happened. And I think it had a lot to do with the way I was thinking too. So when you don't have protection, life feels scary.
I'm pretty sure these guys probably are now incarcerated.
No, well, maybe. No, one isn't.
One isn't?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm not afraid at all.
Good. So now you wind up going through a new phase in your life where you're, how did you take all of this and create an environment that not only winds up helping you to defragment all of the chaos? Because this is what I tell people on this show. This is a judge-free zone here, whether you're on the Zoom or whether you're in here. And I like the fact that you said you did take one thing out of that, and that's not to judge people. And I tell people, this is your story, not mine. This is yours. It happened to you, and that's the bottom line. But all these things that have happened to you, how do you defragment and refragment to make a difference in your life? And how do you take this to carve your career, because now you're doing something different?
Yeah. Well, basically, there's a quote that I just love, and it's related to this. It's by Alvin Toffler, and he says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write. It's those who cannot learn, unlearn, and learn again. And I feel like for whatever reason, I always believed from the time I was very young, I would always look for the reason and the learning of what was happening around me. I don't know how or why I did that, but it was just a natural thing for me to do. I'd say, okay, this is happening. What am I learning from this? What is the reason this is happening? This is happening for a reason. What am I going to get out of it? I don't know. And then I was in school. So when I was in school, I was, going to school for a psychology, experimental psychology, my first degree. And what was happening was I also went into the 12-step program for like codependency and, like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon or whatever. So when I was with him, I was also learning about a design for living that is really incredible, and it's a really healthy design for living. So that was being built while I was also experiencing these things. So your question, I can't even remember what your question was. What was it? So,
I was asking you, because of all of the situations in your life, how did you manage to defragment everything to make a difference, not only in your life, but in the life that you're creating now to help other people as a therapist?
Yeah. So basically what I did was every time I experienced something, I did a lot of different things. I would go inward. I never went outward. I mean, maybe for a minute. I believed that I was not going to blame outward because of the experience. I was going to go inward and find out, am I addicted to crisis? What is the reason I'm addicted to crisis? I would do things where I would do a lot of inner child work. So I would actually visualize myself going into my childhood. I do that now to clear things out. I just studied everything. When I was in school, every patient or client that they wanted us to write about, guess who I wrote about?
You?
me.
Yeah.
So every paper was about me. And then I went into, right after that, when that was all happening, I actually went into a church. And I was in a church for a long time. And that brought me a lot of healing. The kind of church that I was in was one that believed in not just, oh, you're new, forget everything and just, act perfect and don't deal with what's inside. They were really into helping you deal with what was inside. And I developed a really bad eating disorder. But that was after I had this other really major crisis. I don't know if you want to hear all these crises, but
I'm listening, and the viewers
I don't know if I should tell you the victories or 'cause I don't want the podcast to end at all these really bad things. But basically, I went into this church and I made another really bad decision. Really bad.
You made a bad decision after leaving a church?
No, I was in the church and I was in the church for a long time and I was really
you need to tell that real quick. I was
living well and really working on myself in 12-step programs, in school and everything. Mm-hmm. And basically I just made another bad choice with a man.
Oh.
I didn't really know that it was a bad choice at the time, obviously, or I wouldn't have made it. But I got into a relationship with a man who was a recovering addict. So he had a couple of years clean. So it seemed like we were compatible. He understood all this, the life, but he relapsed. Oh. And I broke up. We were engaged. So basically he relapsed and then I broke up with him. That was a good decision, right? I broke up with him, but he died by suicide because of that on the same day. So I left, I broke up with him, and he sent me 24 roses with a suicide note on it. And I was like, oh my God, in the morning, because I left, I broke up with him in the morning, suicide note, and I called the police, called his family, and went over there, and his nephew was there, broke the window, and he was in there dead. So
let me ask a question. I'm sorry for your loss on that. I know as a therapist, that had to be definitely one of the toughest things for you to grasp because it was under your watch. You are the professional here.
Well, at that time I was in school, but it happened again. So that's always been my question. I was like, what am I, a black widow? What the hell? But
what do you do now? What do you do now to overcome this? You got to take some grips with yourself. You got to get your me, your why back. What do you do?
So at that point, basically I was young and I was devastated. Like crushed to the bone. And I learned about grief hands-on. And this is where I really want to say to you, Andre, this is a very big thing that I really believe. There is something about learning things through experiencing them that you just can't get any other way. And right. I learned about, which I studied. So I studied grief. I took classes on death and dying. But when you're in that, and you cannot get away from yourself. You cannot run. There's nowhere to go from yourself. I just had to say, I know I'm going to be better in 2 years. And that's what I would say. I'm not saying that's a healthy way to go, but this is what I was doing at that time. And
why did you say 2 years?
Because I just figured it would be at least that. So I just thought if I saw that there was hope in 2 years that I could go on, that's how I in my own mind managed that.
Right.
But then what I learned was this unbelievable rage that would come inside of me. I wasn't doing it to any people, but I'd be driving and feeling and it was outside of my control. And I learned about what grief anger is, because it's something that you just don't understand, because it's not like natural anger. Mm-hmm. I didn't really, but I got it. So then I literally, during this period of time, now I'm really, really, really working on myself. I had been working on myself like since I'm 18, but still not better, because
Allison, what is grief anger? That's a new word for me. What
yeah,
is grief anger? What's an example of it from your
yeah,
experience? Because like you just said, I may have experienced it with the loss
yeah,
of my mom, but maybe I didn't know that's what the terminology was.
yeah.
What was it? What was the experience?
Yeah. So with that experience, I can tell you with my recent experience, the reason that it all came together because
Hmm.
when I just had my recent loss, I lost my husband. When I had that loss, basically what that makes me cry whenever I think of it. But when I had that loss, I remember saying to myself, oh my God, I just have to make sure I don't have that same anger because that is crippling. So the anger is like something, usually, like if you have anger, you have some sense of it coming from somewhere. Like,
Hmm.
you pinpoint it onto something. But what it almost feels like it embodies you. So what actually did happen, which really bothered me, but thank God I think I've moved through it. But about 2 years, about 2 years after my husband died, and this is just like almost 3 years ago, about 2 years, for a good 6 months, I was so mad. And it's not just, it's in your cells, it's in your body, and you can't control it. Like the lens you're looking out through is just everything looks angry. And it's very hard for me to explain because and I said, oh my God, it's here again. And all you want to do is find, like, the feeling is, oh my God, can I please just find myself again? Where's Alison in all this anger? And that it's so painful, that part.
Was I'm not going to hash too much on this because I can see that it's still there because pain is always still there. But this is a question I have to ask
Yeah, it's okay.
because you brought that particular phrase up.
Yeah.
Was there a difference in the level of
Yes.
anger from the flower incident with the boyfriend who had some issues versus
Yes.
what was that? What was the difference between
Very
the two?
big difference. Very big difference. So the difference in that, I was younger and the anger was it was like on 10. It was like just, I felt I would see like a brick wall and it'd be like, I just want to smash my car into it. Like that, like rage. But no one really knew. It was just inside. Like
Mhm.
I just had hate. And I knew that it was because of that, but I couldn't get out of it. And then with just recently, I was just aware of it, and it was just this kind of smoldering, just almost like it's hard to explain because it wasn't pointed at anyone. It just was a hatred inside, like an anger that just felt, it was like a lower level of it. And I kept saying, Alison, you know what this is? I just want to get back to me. And I remember just feeling like I just felt like I didn't have myself, my real sweet, kind person. And my biggest concern was, will I ever come back? That's what's concerned me or frightened me. I'm like, please, God, make sure I get back, you know? So it feels like you're never going to be yourself again. That's what it felt like to me.
Thanks so much for really coming on and sharing this heartfelt, emotional story. How did you find Alison?
Mm-hmm. So basically, the way I could say it is that I am very intentional. Like everything I do, like every morning, I have a morning routine. I wake up. I say when I go to bed at night, I marinate in what I want to be and who I want to be and what I want to believe. So I'll do even like rub my pillowcase and say, I'm so grateful for how soft this pillowcase is. I'm so grateful that I have a dog to sleep next to that has a heartbeat and it's cozy. And I just like marinate in gratitude. I'll meditate. I just make sure that I'm going to sleep in a good way. And then when I wake up, because over that period of time, since he died, over that period of time, you wake up and you wake up to reality and you just want to say, oh shit, but I intentionally go, and I do it every day. I get to decide how I feel today. And guess what? I choose joy. And I tell people this, I love this. I say, we get to choose our state of being. Most people don't know that. People think that they are a passive recipient of all the external things that are around them. So their life is based, they have an external locus of control. I have an internal locus of control. So I'm like, I get to choose. So I try to keep a steady state of being, which is what I choose is joy, enthusiasm, and peace. So those three things as a cocktail. And then I try to keep my head, heart, feet all in one spot, as I'm going and being a wise observer and say, okay, and if something happens outside of me, I say, what this happened out here. So, and I go inward and I say, this has given me an opportunity to feel something that must be buried alive. Let me go in and find out what that thing is. Let me tend to it. And then if I need to address something out there, I will. But first, I'm going to create more of me. So I'm intentionally living this life. I also intentionally do transitions. So and I don't mean this as somebody who's feeling broken. This is like a natural, I believe in this, just living this way. When I leave work and I get in my driveway, I say, how do I want to show up in my house? And I choose it. And then I visualize it and I do it. So my inner world is not dependent on the outer world. Like I get to decide how I show up, who I am, what I think about. I believe that thoughts create everything and I'm creating a life. Really my whole mission is to help other people to know that we are all automated. I was automated by all of that programming, and it had me. I say it in my book. I kept wanting to be the girl who gets the princess bedroom. I was the girl who did all the effort to get there, but I always knew, back then, I don't now, that when I get to that beautiful bedroom, that princess bedroom, I'm not going to be the girl who gets it. I'll do all the work to get there, but I won't get it. So I was always a hard worker, but I never believed I could get it. So that's why I would choose things that would just destroy my life, right? So I don't know if I'm talking too long.
This is your story.
Okay, I didn't know if the time was up. So, but I want to respect your time. So, you can just interrupt me. But anyhow, so basically, it's a whole design for living that I live and I try to share with others. I do believe, when I was writing my book, I had a supernatural experience that was really incredible. I went to do my last edit on my book I went to Mohonk Mountain House. It's a beautiful place, and I was laying on a massage table, and I was working there on my book from like 5 a.m. till 10 p.m. for like 3 days. And I had this experience where there was like this just presence. And I just heard in my mind's eye or whatever saying, you've hidden your talent for far too long, Alison. You need to tell the truth. And you need to tell the truth where your true education is. So, and you have to, and your true education is not 8 years of college, 30 years of experience. That's not your true education. So I went into my book and I wrote what my real education was. And it was having an eating disorder and being hospitalized. It was being in a murder trial. It was experiencing a somebody that died by suicide. Now, to
Right.
tell you this crazy shit story, it's so crazy. Wait till you hear this. So basically, I get this message. I go and I do this work, and I'm like, all right, I know, God Almighty, I know that I'm supposed to tell the truth. So because people always thought I like looked so good, they didn't know the story behind it.
Right.
That's why I openly talk about everything. So basically, I went in and told that story in the book. I'm just about finished. I worked a lot and added a lot of stuff in there. And do you know that I lost every single thing? My computer completely shut. Every single edit was gone.
Wow.
Everything.
Wow.
Everything. And I went, oh. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to recover it. I call my publisher. I'm talking. He's like, all right, well, how are we going to find it? I was the only one who had the stupid edit. I was like, so then I'm like, all right, whatever. And then I was like, so many people are trying to help me. We worked 7 hours to try and get this, whatever. And the whole time I'm just like, you know what? This is happening for me. It's not happening to me. I cannot not imagine why I would get this message from the divine and then have it lost. How could that even be? It makes no sense. But so what happened was I put down the book. I was like, you know what? I just can't freaking do this. Like, whatever. And then I went about, I'm doing all this work. I meditate. I go on these advanced retreats to meditate with Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm doing all these things. And then my beloved, when I tell you best friend, my husband dies by suicide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how is this? So then after that, like a while after that, I picked up the book and I wrote all those things again in there. And it, in the forward, I talk about my husband, but I realized that this is real life. This is an abundant life. This is a life, we live in a mess. Like, I know how to reprogram a brain.
Right.
And that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it hands-on. And, a lot of times I always think that somebody from if you have generations of dysfunction and you're the first one, it's usually you're the pilgrim, I'm the one cutting through the, pathway. Right. So I'm very dedicated to working through and showing people how to not be automated anymore and how to rewire, because unconsciously, like most people, like I talk about that we will, I would say, like, I keep putting in my navigation to go to California. I keep ending up in like Mississippi. I don't understand. Like, this doesn't make any freaking sense. So I'm like, all right, because the inner program is the thing that's leading. Our brain is a goal-driven machine, and it's following a program that I don't know is there. But in the book, I'm telling people that they can do a whole life inventory. Like, if you look at the snapshot of your life and you look at financially, emotionally, spiritually, socially, relationally, and you just look at without judgment, very important that you don't judge yourself. You just know the truth. Mm-hmm. Just look at the snapshot and go, oh, I have this much money, or I'm in this much debt. So that tells me what my belief system is. This tells me what I feel, what I'm worthy of, what I believe I'm worthy of. So now I don't have to do much except know that. And then now I have to work on rewiring that. And you can do it. We all have the power to do it.
Alison, before we wrap up, I'm not going to want to cut you off, but before we wrap up, you gave a lot of information. And once again, thanks for coming and tell us about your story. I know it's very hard to come in and share all that information. Two-part question. First of all, how can the viewers get your book?
It's on Amazon. It's called The Wake Up Call. It's called A Wake Up Call, an interactive read for building the life you want. It looks like that.
Okay, that's a nice book.
Yeah, it's nice, right? Yeah. And it's like a workbook.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then my next question, real quick, you're doing something to help empower other women through the workbook and through other activities. Just briefly share a little bit about what you're doing and the difference that it's making to help individuals overcome their mental health.
Yeah. So basically, I founded a counseling center. I just began it with just me, and I just let it grow, and it just kept growing organically. And now I have 5 locations in New York, and I just have a bunch of therapists, medication, psychiatric nurse practitioners, art therapists, all of them. So I train and help therapists to learn, like, we don't just stop at the symptoms. We work at creating, that's when we step on the gas for people to find their greatness. Mm-hmm. Like, there's too much like dullness. So I don't know if that's the question you're asking, but yeah, so I build counseling centers and try to train up more of me's. So, you know, I feel like it's our duty, you know, before we hit our grave, try to like share what we know. So I do that. And then I have a podcast, you know, Alison Answers, Mission Awake. And, you know, I do all sorts of things on that. And I'm just going to have that. My podcast got moved to a TV show, but it's going to now also, I'm going to do something called What Is Your Problem? And it's like very light, airy thing about therapy. But it's also about, it's, you know, people's problems in the street. Mm-hmm. And then it's also me really sharing about how to really resolve a problem. I just want to say that there is always a solution. There is no problem that cannot be solved. I'm certain of it. I know that.
Before we wrap up, you've been through so much, and you definitely have that beast mindset. You've overcome. You're passing that knowledge on to others by helping and empowering with your podcast, with your treatment centers, with your workbook. Leave the viewers with something positive before we wrap up today's show.
Yeah, I just want to say that a decision is a power move. So the quote, I lay hold of my vision, obstacles must give way. There is an incredible power neurologically. When you make a decision to do something, the firing in your brain stops, the competing firing in your brain stops. And then you have your whole being settles down, and your brain will now take you unknowingly to that decision. So I tell people, like, stop saying you want to buy a house. Say, I am buying a house. Stop saying, be the person now in your mind that you want to be, and stop saying you want it, because people want things all the way to the grave and they don't get them. But you can create anything you want if you decide it. It's a power. We all got it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Alison Lager on another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show.